directly. What do we need? We need our devices. Our devices act on our behalf, which is why there's so many hacking attempts and there's so many data leaks, is because we are not able yet to actually communicate with this world directly, right? With biometrics or any type that identifies us. The device is actually acting on our behalf. As you can see, there's obviously a lot of issues with that. Access is delegated on the device, but some of the questions that we have to ask, especially when we're talking about mobile marketing and who these users are, how do you verify that the device is actually acting on your behalf? How do you actually know that the person behind the phone is actually generating this data that we're actually running algorithms and marketing campaigns against? And which device has priority over which, right? If you have 10 devices and one of them gets compromised, can that device actually now override everything else that I have? So these are real problems that we're dealing with today that is actually affecting our ability to run these campaigns or do anything in the marketing world, because we don't know if this data is legit, we don't know if it has been generated by AI, or we don't know if it's been generated by the actual humans that we're actually trying to target. So self-sovereign identity. So what is, as I mentioned, is given at birth, right? Google defines this as the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to have. It's contextual, so it always needs verification from a trusted third party. And trusted is in quotations because how do you trust, right? Do you trust the US government? Do you trust Google? Do you trust Facebook? Like, who do you actually trust when you're actually doing or interfacing with these networks, right? It's a fragmentation of smaller pieces of you. So your LinkedIn, as we mentioned, your Google profile, your Facebook profile are all disconnected. So how do we actually bring all of that together? It's difficult for humans in the digital world, and it's incredibly challenging for IoT and low-power devices. So the evolution of digital identity, this is where we are today, right? It's isolated, it's complex, it's vulnerable, time-consuming, it's frustrating. You connect to some type of trusted domain, whether it's Facebook, Microsoft, whatever third identity provider it is, and then those you give access to another company to use your Microsoft identity, but another website might actually use Google and Facebook, so it's a complete mess. So these are kind of the three, and this is where we're going in terms of the next 5-10 years. So you have the centralized identity, so you are an individual, you sign up for this company, the company now has your email, and that's how they authenticate that it is you. You have federated, which is where we are today. Federated means that, okay, so I have an ID provider, which is every time that you see in a little website that says log in with Facebook or log in with Google, this is what federated means. It means that Google now can act on your behalf and say, yes, you can actually log in to this specific website, but you have to go through me, Google, or Microsoft, and I'm going to give authentication to this website without disclosing this information. Obviously, that's theoretically, because as we all know, the data leaks over the last few years have been incredible, and nobody has actually been safe from this. So the self-sovereign, which is a distributed all the way at the bottom, you are actually in power of your own identity. So without getting too much into it, what this gives you is that depending on what kind of model you follow and what kind of models these large companies are going to do in the future, this model allows you to actually prove through third parties without disclosing any information about you. So what you're able to do is say, yes, this is my data, and I don't actually have to tell you a single bit of my information. You just have to know that I am male, over 35 years old, and that's all the information that you need to have, right? Or I can prove to you that I am an individual worth over $1 million, and I actually don't have to disclose any information on my bank account. So that's what this allows you to do. All right, so what? So what's the big deal? That's the deal, right? This is only 2018. If you guys have been following Congress, grilling Mark Zuckerberg is a major problem, right? Everything is about privacy and data. So these are the leaks, the biggest leaks in 2018, right? Number one, I don't know if you are familiar with this one, but Aadhaar, which was the Indian government, they actually lost 1.1 billion public records of every citizen in India. That's incredible. We're talking about a large portion of the planet just like this because of the government, right? So how do we protect these things? And of course, I think Facebook gets the medal because they're twice on this chart. As we know, right, public. Google Plus was a major issue as well, but any company that you've heard of is on this chart with millions and millions and millions of records. Or thinking more, like, let's leave moral judgment aside. Also, the website Madison, that one that was about affairs, imagine that, right? You leak that information, you're destroying the whole world. Again, leaving moral judgment aside, but this is kind of the information that we're talking about, right? Data is the gold of today's age. So these are kind of the three big ones right now leading the effort, which is the GDPR, which is General Data Protection, which most of the world is adopting. Of course, California, because they are California, they always want to be better. So they have their own California Consumer Privacy Act kicking in January 1st of 2020. And it's actually more rigorous than GDPR. And then you have LGPD, which is the Brazilian version of GDPR. So this is not a, oh yeah, we'll worry about it 5-10 years from now. This is actually happening right now. Google in May announced that they're actually redoing everything in identity, and actually they're going to anchor all their identity providers on blockchain using a tool called Hyperledger Indy. Microsoft, the same thing. They're huge on identity as well, especially now with the new contract that they just won from the government. They're going to be redoing everything that we know about identity in terms of like, oh, email and password is good enough. Well, it's not. Middle East and Asia, Dubai, they have a mandate for 2021 that all public records, licenses, title management, anything that is public information must be transacted in a blockchain. There's no more manual process, there's no more centralized anything, and they're trying to actually release that throughout the entire Middle East. Asia as well, China is one of actually I would say is the most aggressive country actually trying to put stuff in blockchain, which kind of contradicts the whole data protection, especially because they suppress a lot of the communication. Europe is huge. Carrefour is also doing a pilot to actually trace all produce, starting with lettuce on blockchain to be able to attest to all these things. And then 60% of them are using Hyperledger, which is one of the permission blockchains as well. The program was actually donated by IBM 6 years ago or so. So, marketing world. So what's happening? How many of you have heard of Brave browser? Ooh. Okay, so you have some homework. Brave browser was actually established by the JavaScript creator and actually the founder of Mozilla and Firefox. It's open source, so you can download it today. You go in, you download it, and it's the antithesis of Facebook and Google. So they believe in a world where why is there a middleman that controls who I actually target? Yes, I can tell Facebook I want to target males and females over 35 years old, I have a specific income and these specific interests, but did you really know that that's actually being served to those customers? That's one of the biggest issues in marketing, right? So it actually blocks ads, site crawlers, and what do they actually do? What is the piece de resistance here is that they actually give the money to the user for interacting with ads. So a brand can go in and say, if you want to see my ads, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of this cash instead of paying a third party, right? So what does this do? That increases engagement because now users actually, I don't have the study here, but there was a study done that users actually don't mind. Most users don't mind seeing ads as long as they find value in these ads. So imagine now creating a world where through a tool, you can actually reward users for seeing your ad, and you know that these ads are actually being served to these users because it's paid on blockchain. The whole identity thing that we've been talking about. So they've actually had 20 million downloads from 1 to 6 million, so it's a very, very rapid growing project. So I suggest you definitely check it out, especially if you're in the digital world. This is just some screens on how that works, and you can actually select what kind of ads you want to have, where you want the money to go, etc. So digital advertising. So these are things, I'm not going to go too much into them because you probably already know all this stuff, but obviously lots of fraud. You don't know where these digital campaigns are going to. You have all these impressions, but do you know what these impressions are? No, you have to take it at face value from Facebook or Google. That world, in my eyes, in 5-10 years is absolutely going to it's changing. It's changing and it's going to continue to change. So it's too much power, right? You have too much power on Facebook and Google that basically own everything, right? So now you have these third-party brokers that are actually selling this digital space that you're going through. And blockchain is actually technology that allows you to have and start reducing this fraud, right? So GDPR obviously is something that is affecting everyone. If you're dealing with data, you're affected by this, and if you're not dealing with data, then you're really not doing anything because everything revolves around data. So how do you target users without selling data? Blockchain can serve as that layer of anonymity and anonymity between users and advertisers, right? Once again, leaving moral judgment aside, if I want to be targeted for things that are taboo, why shouldn't I receive that? But the reason why you're not targeted that way is because people try to hide who they are, right? The select and disconnect. I may be a professional, but I have these extracurricular activities, but I don't get targeted because I'm afraid that my data is going to leak and then it just destroys my profile, right? So this allows you to actually serve a market that is not served today because of privacy concerns from the user. So some of the things that blockchain can do in this is distribute the campaign earnings and affiliate sales real time. So that's just, there's no middleman here. It's just directly from the brand directly to the user. Transparent analytics across parties involved. So given that we have this identity system where you can prove who you are without disclosing who you actually are, it's a very transparent system, right? It's not Google or Facebook developing these platforms and these analytics dashboards for you to trust what that data is. And if you don't believe me, check out Facebook and Google. There's many, many blogs of companies that have completely abandoned Facebook and Google because they've actually proven that a lot of the impressions are bots, not only from Facebook, but from third parties as well. So a lot of their marketing dollars are going to that, and you're just taking it at face value. It also allows advertisers to market across web without dependency on social media and search engines. So this is kind of like the holy grail here, right? If we sit here and we say, yeah, destroy Facebook and Google is not going to happen, right? It's actually the biggest market that we can actually go in and run our campaigns against. If you don't have those two, then digital advertising is going to be very, very difficult. But this is changing already. This is already changing, and it's something that we need to think about and be prepared for the next 5 years because this is coming. And I believe that they're going to start pivoting that business to be in that world as well because they're too big, so they're not going to just sit there. They already have, Facebook actually has a blockchain team outside of Libra. Libra is obviously that currency that you guys have heard. But they're actually working on these mechanisms in order to be able to do this because it is a big value, right? If you own the network and you take a transaction, but you're allowing the brand to go with the user, you're actually shifting your revenue model. And that viewing can be verified on a blockchain, some of the stuff that we discussed here, and payments obviously dispersed because of that ad. So some of the ad serving stuff, it allows advertisers to actually market and host their own ads. So say, for example, instead of me uploading some piece of video that then gets transcoded and then Facebook says that this is actually the most optimal thing for you, which is great, but what about if you want to control how you see the ads or what analytics you want to run as your own company, right? You don't want to rely on a third party to actually give you those analytics. It's built their own, like I said, the built-in analytics, target demographics, because now these demographics are actually telling you who they are, and they're able to prove cryptographically that this is who they are through a third party without actually ever disclosing who is proving that model. And then you reward users for interacting with campaigns, so you can get very creative in terms of what you can do and not limited to the actual platform where your media is living. I think it was on time, right?